A Salvia 80X, DMT, and LSD trip report sent in by Mr. P. I have been meditating for 30 minutes a day for a week now, partially because I wanted to ease my transition into the intense hallucinogen-induced state I entered yesterday, and for other personal reasons as well. In fact, I feel this report is useless without listed motivations for undertaking such a stupidly strong combination of psychoactive chemicals, so I apologise for any uncomfortable realities in advance. My relationship with my girlfriend has been a disaster for around 18 months now. Ever since I went to college and she followed suit a year later, things have been pretty rocky between us. Long distance is hard, but it's largely my own fault. I feel no need to focus on any other contributing factor because it is outside of my control. I made repeated mistakes and caused lots of pain, both for myself and for her. Breaking up, then getting back together for the second time in 1 year lit a firecracker under my arse. I need to make serious changes to myself if I want this relationship to survive. Largely, I need to get my sexual desire under control. The last 2 weeks have consisted of me cutting all pornography out of my life and ending my obsessions with other sexual partners. I've been gradually adjusting my brain to be happier with monogamy. It's worked. An intense attraction to my partner has returned, but constant metacognition is painful. Years of terrible habits don't erode easily, and it's been an uphill battle to say the least. A trip seemed like the best way to integrate my old and new self, to bridge the gap between pathos and logos. The reason for such high doses was just curiosity. I planned to take LSD, then DMT during the peak, then followed by Salvia 80X extract. I figured all bullshit would be washed away after this, all self-deception gone. First I'd need to unpack as I was moving back into my dorm for the spring semester of college. Next would come exercise, and then finally a brief test run with the Salvia. I'll begin the main trip tomorrow. The Salvia is just diagnostics at this point. After spending some time with my housemate, I went into my own room and readied my dose. I placed the leafy particles onto steel wool crammed into my pipe. I started slow, as always. Only a few crumbs for now. I think this is the best way to do Salvia. Start with a threshold amount, and go hard after a few minutes. Salvia is so reality-breaking that otherwise, your brain gets whiplashed and you panic. After I was noticeably intoxicated, I loaded a pinch of material into the pipe. Having only used 40X before, I was unsure of how much this would do. I expected some effect. I placed the torch onto the matter and took it in one deep breath. Now we hold. Wait for my vision to jitter. Ah, there it is. Release. I already know how to focus on the positives, ride the wave, and never try to cling on to any piece of reality. I start by focusing on the pretty floodlights manifesting onto the back of my eyelids. Sally space began to fit itself together. Look at the polka dots, I told myself. But now I was fragmented, and some part of my ego turned into pure fear. It grew like a balloon, and was chasing me around as I zigzagged around my parents' bedroom from my childhood home. I turned counterclockwise and ran towards the camera. My ego was in 5 pieces, and they kept taking turns. I was talking through each of them with different perspectives. Waves of intense zapping, spicy pain, ran all over my body each time my heart beat. I ran towards the camera and entered a vivid alleyway at night. Then, I opened my eyes. Staring at walls or surfaces for too long caused a trip to resume with objects in my vision coming to life. I was just a collection of different voices now. I was smart enough to not start fighting the experience. I let it play out and didn't interfere. Each voice had different perspectives and were from 2 main camps, one of sexual aggression and conquest and the other monogamy. One shouted that I should leave my girlfriend and find new people. The other shouted that she was the only one I needed. They were both terrified of each other. The hedonist was afraid of rules and oppression, and the strict moralist afraid of losing control again. As they argued, they, then I, reconstructed the method which I had settled on already through meditation. A healthy balance between the 2 polar opposites, the specifics of which are irrelevant here, but make perfect sense to me. Recreating the same exact worldview 1 step at a time reaffirmed it was the right decision. I felt deep security in this, even if the walls were still covered in goblin faces and staring off for too long mosaicked my ego again. After 10 minutes, I called my girlfriend to say goodnight. She was stressed because one of her friends was fighting with her, but we ended the night on good terms. I expressed that while I did have a somewhat negative experience, I would go again before bed, and so I did. This time, the fear was there but less pronounced. Every salvia experience has some element of fear, but that is no different than riding a roller coaster or intense exercise. I accepted it as part of the experience. I hit the pipe and held the smoke in before the release. I drifted, with eyes closed, northwest and slowly. I was in an L-shaped cavity. I was the walls and also the remaining quadrant that was raised to create the L. Then, I was given another view of the room from above this time. I saw both angles simultaneously, existing as both the room and also someone interacting with it. I used an instrument to squash the inside of the L and move it around. Both of these perspectives lined up perfectly, and neither one took more focus than the other. Then someone asked, "What's in the walls?" I replied, "My fear." I controlled the room by squishing and twisting it. Depending on the orientation, the fear shrank and grew. I felt more or less panic as a result. The experience became less and less vivid as normal reality returned though. I laughed recounting it all back to myself, and was pleased that the outcome had been more positive this time. Other than occasional incoherent thoughts and ego fragmentation, I went to sleep as normal. The next day, I ate a light breakfast, went shopping as well. I came home, then ate some more, and then I meditated. I allowed any negative thought to enter my brain with the promise that when I was done, I wouldn't tolerate any at all. I felt clear-headed and finally went for an intense run. I returned 40 minutes later to make a light lunch. Though I burned myself while cooking, my vibes were pretty impeccable. I didn't feel afraid. The salvia experience from last night was intense enough to overshadow most of what I was going to experience today. I went to my room and got my acid out of my box of hallucinogens. I inspected my LSD and felt like I should have more tabs. I dosed the 250 micrograms, but kept trying to figure out where my acid had gone. For a few minutes, I was sure it had been stolen, and I knew exactly who had done it. New Year's Eve entailed me hosting many friends and their partners over for a party, bed, then breakfast. As I was hosting, drugs were complimentary. As long as you like psychedelics, I'm your best friend. Joe was newlywed and was visiting from his job in the Air Force as a Chinese linguist. His wife, Maya, unlike him, had never ingested any hallucinogens. Joe, on the other hand, he'd broken through on DMT before, and, well, had a tendency in the past to take way too much and make it my mess to clean. For example, getting naked in front of me, screaming, trying to hurt himself, etc. Joe was exceptionally prone to bad trips and was affected by acid in an unusual way. I allowed Maya to eat a whole tab. Though it was her first time, I'm a very experienced trip sitter, thanks to Joe, and this was a safe, happy environment. 2 hours into her trip, Joe dosed the same amount and joined her upstairs. Maya's trip went swimmingly. Alexander and his boyfriend lay together as I gave him 3 tokes of my DMT. It was only his second trip, but he'd been using psychedelics for many years. I allowed him to meditate for 10 minutes before, and then guided him through the smoking process. He took the 3 and laid back with his partner. I sat the other way, ready with diethyl ether, just in case things were too intense. Again, his trip was ecstatic. He broke through and met entities. I told him I loved him and was happy to be his friend. They stayed upstairs talking for a while, and I gave them privacy. Alex and his girlfriend wanted to try DMT as well, and it was also their second time. I offered to load it for them and allowed them to smoke it in private, since each couple had their own personal bedroom. They agreed and went off. He came down a few minutes later, stumbled around some, and chatted with the group. After a while, I asked if they wanted to go again, and after some hesitation, they said yes. They went up again and had a wonderful time. They took turns, and their room was full of rainbow colour and intense patterning. Joe was planning on taking DMT during his acid peak, but when I visited him in his room, he was not doing well. He was borderline comatose and aloof. His girlfriend handled the same dose far better despite it being her first time. They were squabbling and wanted me to sit down and meditate for them. I did, and came to the conclusion that they were just high and arguing about nothing. This helped somehow, and their night, at least for a few hours, was intimate and bonding. I took my girlfriend into our room in a separate building. We went to sleep at 2 AM, January 1st, 2023. I had no clue about the nightmare that awaited me the next morning though. I woke up and took my girlfriend home as she needed to be with her family, and then checked in on my friends. Joe and Maya were gone, but everyone else was just waking up. Okay. I called Joe. We were at the park down the street. Maya was afraid of the house. She couldn't return to it ever again. They needed me to pack for them and bring the bags to my car and pick them up. Joe could not leave Maya alone, not even for a few minutes. Well, what happened? I asked Joe. So after I'd gone to bed, Joe snuck downstairs and stuck his greedy fingers into my stash. He loaded my pipe full to the brim with my DMT and returned upstairs to his wife. He explained to her the DMT trip. It was like a fantasy. You see entities, you go to this alternate dimension, you go to hyperspace, and it's euphoric like a full-body orgasm. To someone who had just experienced their first ever mild psychedelic experience a few hours prior, I'm sure it sounded great. It sounded like a fantasy novel, an adventure. No risks, just beautiful fun. He gave her the pipe, knowing full well what it was capable of. He knew the risks. He knew what happens when DMT goes south. 3 full lungfuls of smoke out of the machine, the breakthrough dose. Not to mention the LSD was still coursing through her veins. He helped her take it all in, and she fell asleep. When she came to, she screamed and threw herself around the bed. She was inconsolable for an hour. She sobbed uncontrollably while she was trapped in the trip for eternity. God stood idly by as she was tortured forever in her own personal hell, all thanks to Joe. They pulled an all-nighter together. Maya was scared of her own thoughts. If Joe left the room for any length of time, she started sobbing again. Eventually she needed to leave the house, and they walked to a local park and just sat there for hours until the sun rose. At the most awkward Waffle House breakfast of my life, Joe tried to justify his decision when Maya spoke of her trauma. DMT creates an endless void. It's your choice what you chose to furnish with it. What a moronic statement. I snapped at him. She was clearly traumatized, and I'm certain she has PTSD now. There was no possibility for that trip to go well. What an absolute dumbass Joe was. Now, to top it all off, I sat on the floor staring into my depleted supply of LSD. Did he steal them from me? I couldn't tell, you know. I certainly didn't trust him. I don't think he did. It took me a long time to convince myself that I'd just been more generous with giving it out than I remember. But still, I couldn't shake Joe's aura off of me. He corrupted something that I love. DMT is a beautiful tool, and he had tarnished it and hurt someone very badly. His spectre followed me into the bathroom as I readied the water for a shower. I understood that he was acting like a sponge for all my fears and anxiety. His actions felt so big and bad right now as a proxy for everything that worried me in the whole world. I reminded myself that I left negative thoughts for meditation. This was no time to allow my brain to run wild. After a few minutes of breathing, he finally left my mind. I dried myself off and returned to my bedroom. I put on rain ambience. After 10 minutes, I began to draw. I was 40 minutes in, but I felt very little. I stopped drawing after a little while. With tryptamines, I can usually focus my mind in a way to induce powerful euphoria. I'd felt the same exact feeling one time when I was falling asleep on acid, so I tried to recreate it. While I did feel positive overall, I couldn't figure out how to intentionally cause the euphoria. But this gave me an opportunity to really watch my transition from sober life to the trip begin. I noticed that whenever I opened my eyes to look out my window, a wave of panic hit me. I was shocked by the juxtaposition of familiar images and my drugged-out headspace. However, this was a good thing for me. I had a method to intentionally induce fear. I relaxed myself a few times and opened my eyes and felt that fear. Eventually, I stopped feeling it. I'd trapped its very essence. I could feel the fear inside of me, and while it still had some control, I could observe and sense its movements. It was logical and smart, but also a Debbie Downer. This is going to follow me through this trip, I said to myself. It was a stowaway, a ball and chain, but I figured I'd be fine, as it seemed to be contained. I checked my stopwatch. 90 minutes. That made no sense, and this was nothing. I felt sober. Though the leaves outside my window were made of repeating mirrored images, and with my eyes closed I saw shapes and animals, I had no visuals otherwise. I thought that maybe the meditation was causing this. Most strongly visual experiences involve a chaotic environment. I felt grounded. Maybe not sober, but grounded and safe. I drew for another 40 minutes, until a little after the 2-hour mark. My mind turned to 3 famous men, all of which had fallen from grace in the past month alone. I thought about my sexuality. I couldn't think of any famous men that I wanted to be like. Are there any good male models out there? I thought about my own struggles with my masculinity. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being a good man? At a minimum, I was actively working towards improvement, and that's the most anyone can do. Maybe someday I will be a great man, but until then, I felt happy to be getting better. At this point, I figured it was time for the DMT now. I, with newfound confidence, loaded my pipe. It was a machine, that is. A bottle with steel wool in the neck and hole to suck through. I filled it to the brim. "Let's do 3, I said. I'd never done 3 tokes while peaking on LSD before, only ever 1 or 2. I suck in the flame. The first hit reminded me of the pain that I associated with smoking DMT. The taste was nice, but the smoke was always harsh. For one moment, I doubted my ability to get 3 whole breathfuls. I went for the second. The DMT visuals were already taking over. My eyes focused on the pipe, and the room around me was a mess of colours. As I inhaled, stripes of rainbow diffraction shot through my vision. The pipe began to turn into a mess of triangles. Ego death hit before the 3rd toke. My only mission in life was to get the 3rd. I was already passing out, my eyes closing on their own. I was barely able to get the 3rd down, and was shocked when I did so successfully. Everything morphed into radial stripes in a central form. I couldn't think, I was just observing. I felt no euphoria, but the mix of emotions were identical. The central form spoke to me in an alien tongue. It was pure energy, with no earthly body. The space I found myself in was simultaneously infinitely large, yet a torus with a finite centre, with swirling bands of colour orbiting the centre violently. It was stormy, and I was uncomfortable. It felt like every serotonin 5-HT2A receptor in my brain was fully clogged, and the floodgates were fully open. No one could enjoy this much stimulation. And this was peak psychedelia right here, the final plateau. The centre was talking to me, drawing my attention. There were no thoughts anymore, no language, just information. This was nostalgic. I'd been here before. It was a memory. I was looking at God. This was everything and everyone. All consciousness. From pure energy, it turned to the mix of emotions that I was feeling right now. Drive, happiness, fear, sadness, sexual desire, etc. All the main categories of emotion had formed. Each had their own distinct colour. They spun intertwined, in an impossibly complex fashion. Each began emitting bright, colourful light. Reality had begun to break into 4 parts. In each quadrant, a demiurge materialised, drawing energy from the centre like a fetus and umbilical cord. They grew from geometric forms into humanoid figures. Each one took a mix of emotions and power from the centre. They were all in competition. They had come from the same eternal force, yet were at odds. They pulled and tugged at each other. Sporadically I travelled through tunnels, yet still perceived these events unfolding. The world began tearing apart at this point. I was pulled back from all this as the DMT began to wear off. The figures evaporated and shot off into infinite directions. There was knowledge and information everywhere now. This was the birth of data itself. And all that was left in the centre was empty, logical scaffolding. The beings swirled and took turns speaking to me. I was in and was part of fractal geometry, and melted together with them. I then opened my eyes, revealing visuals more colourful and all-consuming than anything I'd ever seen. Holy fucking shit, I say. My memories started coming back. My ego began to reconstruct itself. I was in shock and awe at my choice to take that much. I began laughing. That was a fucking creation myth right there. I had just witnessed the birth of the universe itself. The world wriggled around me. The ceiling tiles moved around wildly and swapped positions with a rainbow colour running over every surface. The walls were made of hyperspace and the carpet was fractal. I kept closing my eyes and nodding off back into vivid closed-eye visuals of complex geometry. I laid in bed enjoying the images and euphoria. I was pretty dumbfounded for a few minutes. I then thought about the salvia. Was I actually going to do that? I'd been unsure if I would be up for it, but in that moment, I felt it calling to me. So I stood up, used the bathroom, my face in the mirror being polygonal, and then went outside onto my porch. Colours were incredibly saturated and swapped hue rhythmically. The weather was perfect. I was tripping pretty hard, but I felt grounded. I loaded my pipe with the salvia extract, about as much as a negative trip yesterday. I grabbed a big blanket and laid it down in my backyard. I sat down on top, breathed. I was nervous that my neighbours may see me, but I ignored the fear and held the torch to the pipe. I got only a small amount of smoke. I think the plant matter blew away in the intense breeze. Felt only a minor indication of salvia. I ran back inside and loaded up again. I sat outside, calmed myself and took the hit. This time I got quite a bit of stinky sour smoke. I lay down. I look at the tree above me. It moved in a rhythmic fashion with pieces of it moving from side to side. I began to ascribe parts of my ego to each collection of branches. We were playing a game. But for some incomprehensible reason, I thought the salvia wasn't working. I thought I was just pretending to feel these effects, and that I was using my imagination manually. So I get up, grab the blanket and pipe, and walk inside. My entire vision, and me, are getting compressed horizontally to fit into the shape of a rhombus. Ideas and visual movements are all resolving over and over and fitting into their proper place each time as I act in the physical world. I walk into my kitchen and think for a second about stimulant-induced psychosis and how it would probably feel like this. Then some part of me is like, oh, this is the trip. Somehow, I hide this from the divine figure watching this all happen so that he doesn't freak out. Sit down on my couch. I'd planned on going to my room, but this was fine for now. I told myself to just hold the pipe for a few moments. I nod off, looking out the window. The walls and trees outside morph into an alternate reality where two entities are talking to each other. I snap myself out of it and realise I'm just sitting on my couch, frozen in time. This repeated over and over and over. I forget I'm even holding a pipe, and then I'm shocked to see it's still in my hands. Then, I decided to walk to my bedroom. I realise I'm pretty fucked up right now, as I basically flop onto my bed. I keep talking to myself and people that aren't there. I think I'm on a farm and I am the fence and grass. I decide at this point that the salvia isn't working. I lean over and load up the pipe again. My entire reality for a few seconds is a game where I have to get the salvia out of the little baggie. Ended up spilling quite a bit of it, but I get enough to smoke thankfully. I lay back on top of some random objects and debris from outside. I smoke the same amount as last time and get a big full lung of stinky smoke. It's too much for a moment, and I begin to nod off. I see lizards and reptiles running around a square spiralling tunnel towards some vanishing point. I open my eyes, and now everything is just reveal after reveal. Every time I think I know what's going on, I realise I'm tripping balls. I think my reality is a conversation between two people on the wall, and then suddenly, nope, I'm in my bed still. I just smoked salvia. My LSD visuals become people and objects. Machine ants run all over my walls. Reality itself becomes a blur of random moments. Doesn't matter half the time if my eyes are open or closed. I keep thinking I'm on the couch still. I don't remember how I got here. There's a knock at our front door, and my roommate gets up to answer it. Must have been the police. My neighbour saw me in the backyard, I thought, and called the cops. I wanted to get up and show them that I was sober and fine, because the salvia had already worn off. Someone in my head said to stay put where I was. And this person who said to stay was actually really wise and somehow was enjoying himself. He wanted to smoke more after a while. I kept freaking out and asking him, what is going on? Couldn't figure out what was real and what was delusion. He said, it's okay, don't worry, you're just on drugs. He had to keep reassuring me. For some reason we kept talking about this guy named Quentin. We kept talking about his history, life and philosophy. I had no clue why. Apparently he's a college student. This was probably going on for around 30 minutes. Someone realised that I'm out of control and I'm smoking too much salvia. Someone said, whatever, let's do more. I stuffed the pipe full of plant matter, maybe a bit less than the last time, and hit it. The end of the pipe was on fire afterwards, so I haphazardly placed it on my bedside table. Luckily, there were no embers that fell onto the carpet below. I rolled over and started laughing at the silly notion that my room might catch on fire. Whoever was suggesting that was possible was way too nervous. The vivid Sally space had returned once again. I was watching bugs wander around with my eyes closed. At this point, the chronology doesn't exist. My entire reality was either deja vu or random facts about this Quentin guy. Closing or opening my eyes made no difference at all. Someone was enjoying this, so I asked him, "Are you okay with this then?" "Yeah, it's all good, just relax," he responded confidently. Was he really okay with all this pain and fear? I lay back and was outside of my house. I was watching this guy called Quentin, who's a college student on salvia. And then wham, I am that guy. This was the biggest reveal of the whole trip. Over and over, reality had revealed itself to be an illusion. But finding out I am the person we were talking about was the biggest of them all. I see the DMT pipe next to me. Why not? There was quite a bit of DMT left. It hadn't even melted. I just need the lighter. Where is it? Someone tells me I probably sat on it. I checked and they were right. I take one toke and lay back. But it doesn't hit immediately. I close my eyes. I don't even experience it coming on because I forgot I even smoked it. My vision is now full of drab, earthy coloured cityscapes that slowly experience a boost in colour. The geometry that things are constructed of becomes more intricate, and I feel euphoric. I'm moving. I feel interconnected with the universe itself, and I'm zooming through tunnels full of machinescapes. I open my eyes, and my room is a funhouse once again, with rainbow colours adorned. I mainly keep my eyes open for this experience. Objects in my room come to life and are covered in vivid patterns, and I'm struck by the pure beauty on display. I was watching microorganisms swim around inside my head and in the room, as I went for the machine again. This time, I take 2 tokes. I close my eyes and tell myself to wait for the effects again and that they'll happen naturally. I watch as the chameleon-like sea dragons swimming in my mind become extra vivid and radiate colour. I follow one of them as it swims along a leafy branch and travels down a sloped stem. The experience then explodes into a delirious mess of colour and vivid hallucinations. Rotating and flopping around in bed presents me with different realities. Occasionally, I felt as though this entire experience was a waste. Nothing I was experiencing was abnormal, this is just life. I wanted an unusual experience of bizarre occurrences, but this was incredibly normal stuff. At that moment, I felt sorry for wasting my time. The more confident voice from earlier is now present again, and I ask him, "Are you really okay with this?" And he says, "Yes." He starts gaining more control at this point, and I start to fully remember what drugs I took and how I got here. Someone, I think the confidence voice, suggests we go for a walk with some music. He said a change of scenery sounds fun, but I think he was just running away from the problem. So I put on my headphones and go outside. Reality is episodic, and I keep nodding off. I'm tripping hard at this point, and still find it a bit difficult to differentiate delusions and reality from each other. I didn't realise the salvia would last this long. Walking along, parts of me were quite scared and weirded out by the whole trip. My ego had been torn apart for so long that some people were starting to get worried. I said, it's all good, I'm okay with the pain, it's part of me, and I do love and respect it, you know. I began reflecting on the trip as the music progressed. Part of meditation and steering trips in the right direction is clearing your head of negative thoughts. Fragments of my ego kept getting mad at me for doing this. They accused me of lying by omission, and told me that I should let it all flow through me instead. I retorted with, is it lying by omission to not hit yourself with a hammer? The term lying by omission refers to giving someone a false version of events by omitting important details. That was not what was going on here though. I know negative things. Why should I focus on them now? I can do that when I'm sober. I love and respect the negativity even now, but let's keep them things balanced, my main ego said. Someone then asked, are you okay with the pain and fear right now then? I said, it's beautiful. I'm watching my brain function as it should be. I walked for 30 minutes and returned home. I was no longer questioning reality now. I was no longer afraid that everything I believed was a ruse. I called my girlfriend. She clearly didn't want to talk. Her friend was stressing her out. I wanted to tell her about my experience, but she was trying to hint that she needed to be alone. I barely picked up on this, but when I did, I gave her an out. I said, we'll call later, right? She said that we would call at 9. I agreed and we said goodbye. Well, that was just great. That's nearly 5 hours away. I felt an intense feeling of sorrow and pointlessness wash over me. What was the point of that trip? I did it for us. I did it for our relationship. But she was being mean. I sat there pretty sad and pretty dazed for a few minutes. I decided to put on some cheerful music. I realised that my sadness was probably irrational and just a result of the salvia afterglow. Salvia has somewhat irritable melancholy after effects. I turned my attention back to my drawing and thought it looked awful, but I figured there was nothing else to work on. After a few hours of music and then YouTube videos, my mood was improved. I think the drawing came together well. I finished right before 9, right when my girlfriend called. After some small talk, I told her about my trip. I told her about my meditation and progress in my sexuality. She was furious. She was repulsed that it had taken me so long to come to the default healthy worldview. But I retorted that as a woman, she could never understand what it's like to be a man, and that I was genuinely proud to have made progress. It was odd, because she agreed with my worldview completely, but was yelling at me and comparing me to a wild animal. I raised my voice as well, until suddenly, I stopped. I started sobbing. I love you, I said. I don't want to fight, I understand why you're mad at me, and I'm sorry for hurting you. She then broke down too. She cried and told me about her friend. They stopped talking to her randomly, and were ignoring her. She felt like no one cared for her at all, and that I didn't find her attractive, and that no one wanted to be her friend. I told her that she was wrong, and that she was amazing. I kept telling her over and over all the different things I loved about her. She stopped the crying, but was still in pain. I then took control, and distracted her by changing the subject. I talked her through the process as I cooked dinner. One of her friends walked into the room with her, and they chatted for a while. After this, her mood was fully improved, and the rest of the night felt perfect. We watched a movie together, and the entire time we joked about salvia and specifically smoking it out of a large bong in a crowded room. The movie itself was full of plot twists, which I compared to my earlier experience, and then she also expressed an interest in revisiting salvia herself. This morning, we have been closer than ever. I genuinely want to talk to her, and I think she does too. Though being open is painful, honesty will always result in health in the long term. I think through continued work, things are going to get better. This experience helped solidify what I learned through meditation, though perhaps a lower dose would have had the same benefit. My days, that was a mammoth trip report right there. Probably the most in-depth single video I've ever made on a trip report yet, which will satiate those of you who want me to make longer content. I know, you're all gagging for that. Before I end up dissecting this beast, just wanted to shout out big time the 3 people who were involved in making this video a reality. So our first special guest was Keith, one of my best mates in real life, as well as one of the masterminds behind Rosa Festival, which I've been performing at every year since its inception. He also provided a particularly saucy drum and bass mix for the channel quite a while ago, so yeah, check that out. All the links are going to be in the description to these guys' stuff. So Keith actually ended up composing the musical score for this trip report. It's really interesting the way he made it flow with the narrative. So say points in the story where things started to get a little darker, the music became a lot more sinister and foreboding, sort of down-tuned as well. So yeah, I thought he did a cracking job with this video and the musical score that he ended up conjuring. So yeah, big ups to my lad. Go check him out, deserves all the support, and we best be seeing you at Rosa Festival this July because that's going to pop off. Definitely the best place to come and see me and other like-minded people. Going to be absolutely class. I know quite a few of the Vivec audience is going to be there, which would be an awesome way to just meet and greet people and get up to some fucking shenanigans and that, you know what I mean? So the next talented individual to lend their creativity to this video was Georgie, who is basically my official artist. If you've not noticed, that I actually featured her artwork as the official channel banner, and also have just featured it on all my social medias as well. Anyone on Instagram knows that I uploaded the full piece that's acted as the thumbnail for this video. Initially I just contacted her about doing the thumbnail exclusively, but when I saw the actual finished piece and then she kept sending me different bits, I was like, nah mate, need to actually feature this as the official Vivec YouTube banner. Massive props to her for coming up with that piece. I can't wait to frame it and throw it on my wall somewhere in my room. Absolute buzz off it. And it's sick that we finally got to collaborate because I've been talking to her on Instagram for way over a year now. I think she was one of my very first, or within the first sort of stretch of followers that I had when I started my Instagram, which has been one of the very best things with this whole YouTube malarkey, is just communicating with people like her on there. And yeah, sick to finally put our minds together and create some mad shit. So yeah, I look forward to more stuff with me and her in the future. So you probably already noticed, but the visuals were provided by Loca Vision on YouTube, who's just absolutely smashing it at the minute. Unreal videos, some of the best, well, in my opinion, the best psychedelic replication videos. There was a great comment on one of his videos that said that Hollywood has been trying forever to replicate psychedelic visuals, pouring millions of dollars into it, and this guy on YouTube has just managed to do it and just blown his competition out the water. And he's just finally getting some serious recognition with his latest video that I just featured at the end of this one, which is the Shrooms Trip simulation, which is just great to see because his work is absolutely fantastic. I featured it before quite a while ago in my, I think it was why science struggles to explain consciousness video. Once again, massive thanks to these three serious individuals. Definitely three of my most trusted allies in my war against the YouTube algorithm. But without further ado, let's digest, or dissect, or possibly even both. I mean, it's big enough to digest and dissect at the same time. This fucking Mac-off trip report right here. So, firstly, the thing that strikes me the most is the synergy between all three of these chemicals. Salvia at 80x extract, probably the highest you can realistically get. DMT and LSD, that is one bold combo. Whilst I personally probably wouldn't indulge in a combo like this, and wouldn't really recommend anyone else to do so, as there's a lot of risks involved. I do respect the guy big time for meditating 30 minutes a day for a week in preparation. It seemed like he was really open for the intense hallucinogen-induced state that he was going to be thrust into. Obviously, you can never really predict where you're going to go, especially when you're doing something as intense as Salvia, DMT and LSD at once. You just really have no idea what's actually going to happen because it's so beyond human reality and so beyond even the limited scope of human imagination. But I major respect for this guy for sort of knowing what he wanted out of the experience and knowing that it was going to be pretty intense. The first thing that struck out to me was obviously the whole aura around this Joe guy. He says that he usually is the one to clean the mess up with when they're going on some psychedelic adventure, getting naked in front of him, screaming, trying to hurt himself. Basically the perfect candidate for someone who should not be taking psychedelics at all and needs some sort of foundational help, in a sense, therapy, working through traumas on a base level sense. because it just sounds like this guy is too far gone to even be able to comprehend the self-reflective nature of consciousness that is highlighted massively on psychedelics. Your shadow will just spill out. Not even on psychedelics, but many psychoactive substances, because obviously salvia isn't necessarily a classic traditional psychedelic. It has elements of, say, other psychedelics and dissociatives, but it is very unique in its sort of structure and its the experiential factor to it. But getting back to our lad Joe, I know a lot of people, or knew a lot of people who were engaging in psychedelic practices that were very prone to just sort of absolutely losing their heads. And oftentimes when you watch them lose their head in front of you, you could just literally see their like ego, their shadow self spilling out into reality. The resistance is causing this like chaotic experience in the mind. When you've got someone who has like such a dense ego like that, and other like trauma that affects them in such a way, oftentimes, if they take psychedelics, they're going to have the classic bad time of getting naked, going crazy, running around in circles, possibly even harming themselves and other people. Some people, even in general, like, it sounds like this Joe might even just be like, some people have a natural affinity for psychedelics, so some people will be massively sensitive. Like, there's so many reports of people taking lower doses and having these sort of like godlike realizations, and this sort of dispels the myth that it's all dependent on dose. Like, I know a lot of people always say in the comments, not a lot of people, but sometimes people will criticize the report or the writer and say, well, this must be completely fake because I took 600 micrograms and I never had an ego death or whatever. Or even the inverse, like, this guy took 100 micrograms and had an ego death, and it took me like 10,000 tabs at once to have an ego death. It's just all completely relative and subjective. People's minds are so complex and varied that you're not necessarily going to have the set experience on 400 micrograms. One person could take it, be completely nullified to it, might have no experience whatsoever. Some person could have the massively chaotic sort of bad trip experience. The other person could have the blissful, transcendent ego death type experience. It really is just relative. It's just sort of like a generalization to say, oh, a strong dose is 300 micrograms of LSD and beyond, and getting heavier into like 500, 600, the extreme doses. But yeah, it's not you won't necessarily always have the same experience each time. I know loads of people who message me on Instagram saying like, hey Vivec, I just took 14,000 grams of mushrooms, and they don't experience anything. I'll just say to them, well, obviously there's a lot of factors in there. Like, your mushrooms might not have been potent. They could have lost the potency. Could have just been like complete fake. Someone could have just given me a bag of shiitake mushrooms and you've scrammed them thinking they're psychedelic. Loads of other factors. But another one I do like to stress is that you won't necessarily, you can't, sometimes there might be a fluke and you might not trip. Like, I remember I've taken like truffles in the past, like these 12-star 20 grams of truffles, these super mega extreme ones, and literally had nothing. There was literally nothing. Like, I got mild visuals for a bit, but there was no psychedelic headspace at all. Whereas I'd taken them in Amsterdam, basically from the same vendor as well. When I was able to acquire that in the UK. Yet when I had the exact same type of truffles in Amsterdam, it was one of my most profound trips I'd had to date. Obviously setting completely influences stuff like that, so who knows? It just goes to show that you can never really predict this stuff 100%, because psychedelics are just so out there and loopy and beyond like the normal human realm that we can't really pinpoint exactly what it'd be like for everyone, because at the end of the day you are taking something that affects your consciousness, so it is very subjective and relative to sort of the individual, how their mind works, the chemical makeup in the brain, life experiences, etc, etc. Getting back to Joe again, and what he did to his girlfriend, holy shit, that is absolutely fucked. What an absolute goon this guy must be. Obviously must have some serious mental issues, which I do empathise with, but fuck me, man, that's really just horrible. Giving his girlfriend the DMT and just telling her to take like 3 tokes, and then she's literally getting tortured by like these ethereal godlike beings in her own eternal personal hell. that is just absolutely horrible. It could have seriously traumatized her, and it's a perfect example of like do unto others as the cycle of abuse. Do unto others as you have done unto you. I absolutely butchered that, but you know what I mean. He's basically just torturing her because he's a tortured individual as well, and this is just again how a lot of like human suffering comes about, is that we don't understand each other and want others to suffer, and when you're really in a dark place and you have a sort of twisted mind, making others suffer is actually a source of joy, and that's like unbelievably unconscious thing to do. This is like on the lower end of fucking life. This is just really a complete inverse of what psychedelics will show you. Just shows how absolutely tapped in Ed Joe really is. I hope Maya is doing much better. I feel really sorry for her. Based upon what he said in the Waffle House, but I was like, oh, DMT creates this endless void. It's your choice what you choose to furnish with it. It's just an unbelievably pretentious, egoic thing to say, and I don't know if Maya and Joe should really be together, which is especially fucked because obviously, it's not even his girlfriend, is it? They were just newlywed. Ouch. Pretty heavy that. Fingers crossed. I think she'll probably get out of that relationship. Sounds a bit toxic, next level toxicity. I mean, I've been through some fucking pretty mad relationships, but at least my partner's never forced me to experience my own personal eternal hell through DMT. That's pretty messed up, to be honest. So yeah, feel well bad for her. Me. Moving on from the Joe arc of the trip, I really respect the guy's approach to handling the fear. So it says that it has this method to intentionally induce fear, relax himself a few times, and opens his eyes and feels the fear completely, just being aware of it, but not giving it the energy that it wants. Sort of the best way to approach fear is to feel the fear, bite the bullet, and sort of go for it anyway. That is often the best thing to do, really. I've noticed in my life, and any time I've had the fear of, ages ago I had the fear of sort of learning to drive, and it was actually the fear that motivated me to overcome it and do it, because I was like, I can't keep living with this fear every day. I'm just gonna own that fear, be aware of it, and just do it anyway. And obviously I was massively anxious first few, literally just getting into the car for my test, or well, not even the test, just the practice at first, and just literally as soon as I got stuck into it, the fear just went away because I was like addressing it through action and consciousness, which is just a great thing to do and can be applied to your psychedelic experiences massively. They'll really help you out. Probably my favourite part of this report, as it is with usually any sort of intense godlike reality report, was him when he actually just became like pure consciousness, that feeling of looking at God, looking at source, everything and everyone, all consciousness, which he very much is, and as we all are, because it's all just one is all is one. So oftentimes within these sort of ego death, this sounds like it went beyond an ego death, because that's another thing I just want to point out, is that ego death is an aspect of the psychedelic experience, but the whole spectrum of awakening, ego death is just one part of it, or several facets. It can go even further, even deeper, completely, because even though there's an ego death, there's often sometimes semblance of knowing that you're a human in the back of your mind, but this is just like what this guy experienced, especially with salvia, which completely just takes you out of any complete understanding of reality. They can experience things that basically we think are completely impossible, like becoming an envelope or something. And this guy became pure consciousness, sort of the substrate of reality itself. It literally is composed of itself. It's nothing, it's everything, it is itself. Why is God nothing? Because nothing literally creates itself. It allows it. Right, let me dial it back. So the reason something comes out of nothing, this is just me giving it from my perspective, is that since the substance, the ground of reality is nothing, aka it's groundless, it means it can literally apply somethingness onto nothing, because allowing it to be nothing means it's no particular thing, which means it can be everything, it can be anything. So that's why I say, even though me tapping these fucking my desk and my wardrobe, it feels like there's a somethingness to it. It's actually using nothingness to imagine that boundary, that distinction. So that's why it is the reality is literally like infinite. It's the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, because it literally is itself. It's creating itself through itself. So the reason God or Source or we as consciousness exist is because it's literally infinite. It literally can make itself out of itself. It's inevitable. There is no start, there is no beginning. It literally just is. Everything you're experiencing right now, your consciousness right now, my consciousness at this minute, this is reality. This is all that there is. Which when you're experiencing a psychedelic breakthrough can sometimes be very disturbing, especially if you've never experienced it before. But let me just reiterate that obviously after experiences like these fucking profound revelatory experiences, there probably is going to be a bit of ego backlash when you sort of re-solidify into your human state of being, and this is just completely natural because again the ego loves homeostasis and it doesn't like being told what the crack is with reality and the truth, because at the end of the day we need to sort of live in this like illusory state of being to experience being a human. Even though there will be a lot of suffering or some form of suffering that can come with that, it just helps to know that in the back of your head that eventually through time, more spiritual practices, more life experience, just anything that just expands your consciousness and opens your mind, you will eventually come to a realization of the beauty of just reality being isness, being just this moment, being the infinite, eternal, present moment. Obviously it can feel a bit solipsistic and lonely, but once you realize that we're so alone that we're ultimately together in oneness, it is actually beautiful when you realize that, say, I am you, you are me, and we've created each other, we create everything. I've created you, you've created me. But in a sense, it's just I, isn't it? The grand I, rather than the lowercase I equals you, it's the I equals the higher case, uppercase you, which means that I am is literally everything. Really quite loopy and paradoxical and strange, but once you go through these experiences and integrate them, it becomes possibly the most beautiful revelation of your life. You realise that reality really is perfect and it couldn't function any other way, and why would it be designed in any other way? It literally is perfection. Once you see the love everywhere, you won't be blind to it anymore, and this is just basically a massive facet of awakening to the beautiful truth of reality. Just taking things back down to a more normal, understandable, material level. What was really beautiful about this was sort of the connection, the deepening of the connection between the writer and his girlfriend. Obviously it was quite emotional at the end. They started sobbing and that, and they said they don't want to fight and they won't understand each other. And yeah, obviously another beautiful aspect of the psychedelic experience is that it can seriously deepen the connection between you and a partner, or even you and a friend, because in the sort of like going back to the metaphysical aspect to it, it really does chip away at the separation, the illusion of you being a separate entity. You'll see that, oh wait, the consciousness in her is very much the consciousness in me, which again there will be some resistance, especially by the ego. It's like, no, this is a separate, fuck me, that shit me up. I'm on a roll now though anyway, so I can't be asked pausing the recording. My god, that was so loud. But yeah, it will completely sort of rid that idea of you being a separate entity, which is what causes a lot of the suffering, the separate thinking we are separate when actually we're so one, even in just like a material level. Like we're literally just humans, in a physical sense. I mean, we're literally humans, we're all part of the same species, but in the highest sort of absolute level, we are literally all just consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, which is probably at 9 million times. I mean, it's everywhere, and like, I am the universe experiencing itself subjectively, which is a facet of like higher truth, but the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and deeper levels of love can be realised. And it's just nice that this trip report was topped off with sort of the realisation of human love and how we can understand each other and connect in deeper, more meaningful ways. Oh, I'm losing myself. I think overall this was a very positive report. This is literally probably one of my very favourite reports, because it combines everything really interesting about psychedelics and the highest states of being it can experience, the entities, impossible realities, God realisation, amplification of connection between self and other. And interestingly, it wasn't massively tampered by the devil incarnate, Joe himself. Obviously, feel sorry for Maya having to go through that horrible traumatic experience. But for the writer in general, I'm glad it didn't end up affecting his report too much. And it seemed like he realised a lot of stuff, like saying how Joe's whole aura sort of tampered with the beauty of the tool of DMT being a profound, beautiful tool for realising higher states of being and deeper levels of consciousness, and how egos, lower conscious beings, sort of like basically demons in human form, can really tamper with that and hurt the beauty of the experience. But thankfully, it really didn't affect the trajectory of his trip. It seemed like he had a really profound, beautiful experience. And it's also awesome that he's even more open now with his girlfriend. And like he says, being open is painful, but the honesty will always result in health in the long term. We as humans can often close ourselves off too much. Again, like I say, this is a sort of a knock-on effect of the separation that comes with being in the physical human earth realm, dream, whatever you want to call it. But part of the reason for that is that during the journey of life, the pain almost inspires you to open up, because you can't just keep holding on to it. You've got to just let go. One of the most important aspects of life is letting go of attachments. Obviously, this is something very prevalent in Buddhism. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all of living a great life, just getting rid of all attachments, but letting go and realising the beauty of everything around you is essential to overcoming the pain, overcoming the fear. And that's why psychedelics are so amazing, because they really do just chip away at that and get to the root cause of what is emanating this fear inside you. Where does it come from? What's the source? How can I work through it? Because they give you that consciousness, that awareness, to be more open-minded and see through the bullshit that your ego is spinning constantly every single day. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Love to do another super mega report video featuring 3 special guests, or however many, fucking get thousands of them on, as far as I'm concerned. I really enjoyed this, and I hope the guy was happy with how the video turned out. And if you can get in the comments and reply to anybody who has questions, which is one of the best parts of doing the subscriber reports, is that they can get stuck into comments and answer any questions that people may have about the experience. Just some closing remarks I'd like to make about salvia, because I know a lot of people are massively interested in trying this, especially from hearing all these crazy reports on the channel. And I do need to emphasise that the disclaimer at the beginning of the video isn't just for show. I don't fully advocate you doing this at all. It's on, at the end of the day, it's on you. I'm just here to tell you like what it's like, sort of giving a scientific account of what the subjective effects are of these experiences. Whether you believe whatever I say about consciousness or not, that's up to you. And if you want to experience these things, then just take it with a grain of salt and realise that you can't always predict what's going to happen, and especially so, if not more so, with salvia and other sort of dissociative drugs like that. Obviously, salvia isn't necessarily dissociative, but oftentimes you can't really predict how these sort of dissociating experiences and sort of delirious experiences can be. And even psychedelic experiences, you can't predict how they're going to be. Really do not, if you are going to do this, then do not underestimate Sally herself, if you want to say that. Obviously, some people think there's like some form of spirit attached to the plant, which, I mean, I can't blame them thinking that. There's often a vibe that you get when you take sort of plant-based psychedelics, that there is some form of like spiritual being associated with it. Whether it's real or not, projection of the mind, it doesn't matter. That's the sort of common experience that people get, and it obviously affects the way their trip plays out and how they interpret it. I don't really care about whether it's true or not. The base fact, like, is it actually a real spiritual being, and can I talk with them about fucking Elden Ring DLC or whatever? But yeah, you need to understand that basically when you're going into doing this salvia experience, it's not going to be like a psychedelic where sort of you'll notice like, oh, they come up and then you'll get like visuals and you're changing consciousness. This can just go from like 0 to infinity in like a few seconds. Obviously, some people have absolutely no experience and they'll just maybe laugh and get some funny zipper visuals. But again, yeah, you don't want to think you know go into these experiences with a humble sense of not knowing anything and just being 100% open to whatever happens, and making sure you don't resist, because I've noticed out of all these reports, if you resist salvia, it can be one of the most destructive sort of like hellish experiences you can imagine, but can also be extremely beneficial for understanding the spectrum of infinite consciousness, and realizing the grand nature of reality and how total and everything it really is. But yeah, being in that clear state of mind before the experience by meditating and just sort of sorting your diet out and just basically doing your best to clear your mind of any negativity, assumptions, and chipping away at that ego can really help you to awaken to a beautiful, profound, and a blissful realization of infinite consciousness through salvia. But I wouldn't recommend you do it. I'd just stick to psychedelics and be safe about it, and remember to keep setting, and all them things I like to reiterate and hammer into your brain every single video. So yeah, probably sick of me talking right now, so I'll sign off. Captain's Log signing off, and I'll see you in the next one.